Finally, one more. Number 8. How many times have you heard people trying to explain when Jesus asks John, do you love me? Do you love me more? You remember that at the end of the book of John? Well, here's what John says. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Now, the puzzle here, for me anyway, is why does Jesus ask Peter whether he loves him more than the others do? Well, he did deny him 3 times, but what did Peter say long before then? You're not going to get it from John. You got to go over to Matthew, because Matthew solves John. Peter answered him, though they will all fall away because of you, I will never fall away. So Matthew records, though John does not, Peter's boast that he was the most faithful of Jesus' disciples. So Jesus, after all this has occurred, asks him, so do you love me more than these? You said you wouldn't fall away. You don't get it from one. You got to get it from the other to fill in the detail. So not only does John solve Luke and Luke solve John, and Luke solves Matthew twice, Mark solves Luke, John solves Mark, Mark solves Matthew, Matthew solves John. There's no way this is an invented story. You couldn't do this. It's too obscure. All these details, you got to look all over the place to try and put them all together. You need the box top to the puzzle. This is putting together an amazing puzzle. So, what kind of conclusions can we draw from this? I think that fictions and forgeries aren't like this. For example, why leave loose ends or raise puzzling questions if you're trying to pass off a lie as the truth, right? There's so many puzzling questions when you look at this. You go, look, if they were really trying to pass off a lie as the truth, they wouldn't let this happen. They would answer all these puzzling questions. Secondly, how can you control what other people will write to make it interlock with what you've written? You can't control. In fact, we'll see next week, not only does this happen internally between the Gospels, there are writers outside the Gospels that interlock with the Gospels, like Josephus and Suetonius and Tacitus, these Jewish and Roman writers. They're writing stuff that interlocks with the New Testament writers. They're called external undesigned coincidences. These are internal undesigned coincidences. Also, this is what actual history, it seems to me, is like. The New Testament writers obviously didn't copy from one another. If they did, if they copied from one another, the accounts would be all the same, right? There wouldn't be these inconsistencies. Passing details interlock in authentic, detailed records told by different people who saw the same real events or knew those that did. Now, do you remember my friend Jim Wallace, who was in here last December? The cold case homicide detective who's been on Dateline 4 times for solving cold case murders that are 30 years old. Well, he wrote a book called Cold Case Christianity, where he looks at eyewitness details. He's great at eyewitness testimony because that's what he does for a living. In fact, he and I do several seminars together now. But in this book, he writes about this way. He says, the early believers could have destroyed all but one of the accounts, changed the conflicting details, or simply harmonized the Gospels, but these diverse accounts were preserved as they are because they are true. They display all the earmarks we would expect in true eyewitness testimony. If the early church had eliminated the 4 eyewitness perspectives and limited us to one tidy version, we would inevitably miss some significant detail. So this is exactly what you expect when you have eyewitnesses. You all agree on the same story. You may disagree over the details, but when you look at the details together, then you can figure out a more complete picture. And sometimes the details appear to be contradictory. In fact, go back to the Titanic. Did I ever tell you the Titanic story? When the Titanic sank in 1912, some of the survivors said the Titanic went down whole. Other survivors said it broke in 2 before it went down. What did they all agree on? It went down. What did they disagree on? A detail, how it went down. Now, are we to say, well, since they disagreed on how it went down, we can't believe the Titanic sank? No, of course not. That's what they all agree on. The same thing is true in the New Testament documents. The New Testament documents all agree on what? Jesus died and rose again. They may disagree, at least it appears anyway, on who got to the tomb first, how many angels were at the tomb, these kind of details, but they all agree on the resurrection, the death, burial, and resurrection. They're not inventing this. They're just doing what eyewitnesses do. Now, by the way, there's a difference between a contradiction and a difference. Differences are not always contradictions. So you just got to look at each one of them and see if they are contradictory or if they're just different.